Hi, it's Steven again, and we're here with a new video. In the last couple of videos, we talked about the history of logic a little bit and the deductive and inductive aspects of that history. We talked about Aristotle in the last video and how his logic was built around grammar and sentences. And now we're getting ready to start talking about Heidegger's logic with his introduction.
And we're going to have a conversation. I am Michael Deckard, the other professor of this course, along with Stephen Williamson, and we decided together these two books. The Heidegger's Logic is the second one. So for this last few weeks of the course, we will be focusing and talking about Heidegger's logic. It was based on lectures he gave. So these pages that you have read come out of mainly student notes, but also his own notes on what he delivered in Marburg, Germany in 1925, and was his teaching of logic and a rethinking of logic. We have purposely chosen this book in order to challenge or disagree with the way that logic is typically taught.
Right, and I discussed that a little bit in the first video as far as logic is traditionally taught as inductive and formal, but that's not really the way that we think. And I feel like Heidegger is not only playing off of that conclusion, but he's also taking it deeper, trying to figure out why we think differently than that and why our idea of truth cannot be so formal, that there's more depth and more, I'd hate to say metaphysics to it, but there's something underneath, underlying truth. And that's what we want to get at in this discussion of logic. So in Heidegger's introduction, he starts by mentioning three Greek terms that we need to take a closer look at. The first one is where we get the word logic from, and it's the Greek word logos. And this is mentioned throughout the history of Western philosophy, as even in the Gospel of John, as knowledge, as the word, as a plea. Aristotle calls it reasoned discourse. The sophists just thought any discourse was considered logos. And here Heidegger seems to be kind of getting back to that, because we can see in this quote that he is talking about speech itself as being the essence of logos. And the way he is using the term logic is going to come really from this equation of logos is literally the word, literally speech itself.
So the next major term after logos or logic is the term physis, where we get the word physics. It's not to be mistaken with the word physics in English, but rather closer to the word nature. I think a close translation of physis would be nature, so the nature of something. In the last slide, the second sentence of the quote said, in this broad and natural sense, speech is a way that human beings behave, one that reveals to a natural, pre-scientific view what the difference is between human beings and other living things in the world. In order to understand logic, one also must understand physis, or nature. On page 1, Heidegger describes the science of physis, of nature understood in the broad sense of world or cosmos, which includes stars, earth, plants, animals, humans, and gods, all being part of nature. We can immediately begin to see how these two Greek terms begin to differ from each other logically, but also relate. So what is the nature of things in general versus what is the way that we talk about something or think about something?
So the third distinction that Heidegger makes is the term ethics or ethos. And he defines the term broadly as the science of the behavior of human beings toward other people or toward themselves. And I think this definition is trying to get back etymologically to where the Stoics were and their understanding of these divisions of knowledge.
This question of a science of human being, or the comportment or behavior of human beings toward other people, gets us beyond logic or physics or nature. So when we think about a logical relation of speech, as Heidegger will go on to do, it is one thing. When we think about the physics or the nature of something like plants or planets, like Earth, it is another thing. And when we think of the relationship of human beings toward other people and toward themselves, this is a third thing.
Ethics or ethos.
Another term used on the very first page of Heidegger's Logic is episteme. This is the word we get is the origin of epistemology, another part of philosophy. This encompasses all three: logic, logos, physis, and ethos. It is a way of knowing or knowledge, and that there is a form of knowing that is logical. There is a form of knowing nature or natural philosophy, what we might call science, and there's a form of knowing ethics, how we behave, how we act. This one term, episteme, encompasses all of them.
So out of these three terms, or four terms that we've discussed so far, Heidegger is going to continue his discourse by focusing on logic itself, or the logos.
And at Lenoir-Rhyne, we actually have other courses. One is called Ethics and Philosophy of Human Nature, both being offered this fall in person. And as Stephen has told you before, this is the first time a philosophy course is being offered online. So you're probably not sold on philosophy yet. However, Stephen can tell you, as being my former student, that sometimes philosophy works better in person, including logic.
Definitely. So getting back to the slides. So the subject matter of logic is what Heidegger wants to discuss in section 2. And he's very careful to point out that even though logic is the science of speaking as we just defined it, that what we're talking about here is not grammar and not linguistics, but the subject of speech itself.
Part of what Heidegger is getting at in the term he means by logic, unlike grammar or linguistics, is what is called adequatio, or correspondence theory of truth. And he says on page 8 that underlying all 5 of these descriptions of the way we could understand truth is the sense of where something corresponds or relates just as something else. So the word gold has to relate or adequately correspond to something that is really gold.
So if you remember from the second video, we were talking about the formal definition of truth and how it's a matter of subject and predicate agreement. So correspondence is that subject predicate agreement. It is saying that gold is gold, and the predicate being is gold defines the subject. And that's the same thing that Heidegger is getting at here.
And behind that is the definition that you see on this slide, that logic is the science of speaking, studies speech in terms of what it properly is, the revealing of something. So this adequate relationship or correspondence relationship is the revealing, or another word he uses is revelation, of the relationship of language to the real world.
So it is this relationship from the spoken word or words in general to the real world this correspondence as where truth is located. But there are two types of truth that Heidegger is trying to
get at.
Thanks.
In the end of this section 2, the last page of the section 2 is an attempt to explain this complicated notion that challenges traditional ways of thinking about logic or truth.
And he divides these two forms of truth into theoretical or practical. So the theoretical truth is, so if you think back to the 5 types of truth that Heidegger lays out on pages 6 through 8, the first 4, I think, correspond to this theoretical truth. And it's the last one, the correspondence to the real, that is this practical truth.
And how Heidegger defines this also relates to the realm of being, and this is unique to Heidegger. So a fancy word for this is ontology. We will get to this in the future.
So in the next video, which we should post relatively soon, we're going to discuss section 3, which is scholastic logic. And scholastic logic means logic as it developed through the Middle Ages up until the modern day. And then we'll get into Heidegger's take on skepticism, which is in section 4. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video.